Welcome to Unlocked, the home of common sense that speaks Britain's language. Today's show is our second Emma Kenny live clinic after last week's epic International Men's Day show and got such a huge, tremendously positive response. Just got a few comments to read out before we move on today. Lindy Lou said, this show has been a lifeline for me, which is lovely to hear. And CJ said, you guys make me feel like I'm not alone. And that's the whole reason we're doing this. I've known Emma Kenny for a long time. I love her to bits, and we share the common touch, and we want to have these kind of conversations to involve real people. In today's show, we want to discuss the difficult topic of care homes and the tangible harms inflicted by a wrong-headed, heavy-handed government's policy on COVID-19. Well, back in May, Matt Hancock assured us that the government had, quotes, thrown a protective ring around care homes since the start of the pandemic, beg your pardon. This proved to be completely out of kilter with reality as COVID ravaged seemingly endless amounts of residents and forced care homes into ever more draconian measures, enforcing separation and loneliness on vulnerable patients nearing the end of their lives. Recently, this culminated in the shocking case of Yelenia Angeli, 73, who was arrested while attempting to kidnap her own 97-year-old mother from a care home in Humberside. In fact, the situation is so grave that Amnesty International have demanded an immediate independent public inquiry into care home residents that they say have been abandoned to die. Today, we are joined by three guests, Michelle, Judith, and Lucy, who are bravely and kindly sharing their stories. Now, today's show, Emma, was prompted not only by the fact we've been having this conversation for many weeks. In fact, when you launched the recovery project, we really got into this, and I'm afraid I found it very hard to maintain my composure. It's a very, very emotional topic, but you posted a photograph on your Twitter feed at the weekend, which I've got to say really affected me. Can you explain to the viewers today on Unlocked what that photograph was about, what that story represents? And I want to get a handle of how big an issue this has been. You get thousands of messages from the public over this. How big a topic of concern has been the mental and physical health and the well-being of the elderly in care homes, Emma?
So I've been sent lots of photographs, actually. A lot of people don't do it on Twitter or Facebook. They send it to me via my website because obviously they want some privacy. And what they've done is sent a picture of before and after. And the degeneration is absolutely palpable. It's quite scary because one of the problems with the elderly is that obviously when you go into a situation like you have dementia, then to some degree, the family is the one consistency that they experience. And if that's taken away, the way that impacts on their brain is terrifying. And also the way that impacts on their physical self is terrifying. So I've got these pictures of 6 months apart and the people are unrecognizable. And the picture you're referring to was actually sent. And again, it's because the mother and father, and it was the granddaughter who'd sent this in, but the mother and father had actually been in these care homes together, but they've been separated from being able to see their family together, and obviously very rarely. And that means that they've completely changed the way that they look, the way that they hold themselves, their actual physical presence looks tortured. And it was just one of those pictures that, when you see pictures that are historic, those pictures that throughout time, there are these moments where you encapsulate this historic moment of everything that's wrong with the way that people are treated. On their faces, it told a story. There's this picture of them at Christmas, just looking happy, together, in love. And then there's a picture now, and they look in pain and totally different. They look years older. But the most important thing you see is torture. And that picture, I think, will be one that in generations to come, it will denote everything that we did wrong.
I couldn't agree more with that. And, on the very, very first episode of Unlock, we started this in my study back in March, and we started broadcasting on the damage that had been done to the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
to the nightlife industry, to comedy, to free speech. But there is no greater area where we can tangibly prove the ravage and the inhumanity of what's been done by this government than care homes. And as we've seen this unfold over the months, I think, and I said before, and I'm going to say it again, this has the genuine power to overcome this government and to overthrow them. And I think it's so, so important that we don't just get bogged down, Emma, we've said this so many times, in pie charts and graphs and data and stats, because this is a story above all about humanity, and more to the point, the inhumanity. When we see those people with their hands to a plate of glass, I mean, I can barely even think about it without getting upset. What kind of stories have you been hearing in your inbox, the specifics, before we move on to tonight's three guests? What are the real moments that sum up the national mood in terms of those personal stories, Emma?
Just devastation all the way through. It's not that they're being very blameful towards the people taking care. I want to make that clear. It's usually the fact that they feel the government have created this legislation that has put care homes in a very difficult and precarious situation. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. If somebody dies because they get COVID, they're damned in that way. If families are kept away and then they die because of degeneration, they're damned that way. So I appreciate it's a really challenging situation for them, but for the families, there is a very simple knowledge base in the NHS and throughout psychological research. And that says that the most important thing in your life, for a life that's happy and also that's long, are close bonds. You remove close bonds, it creates degeneration. You create loneliness from close bonds. It's more damaging than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's as simple as that. So what we know is the very remedy to the situation for these families has been the curse, because the remedy has been to keep them away from one another, which has caused all the very chaotic issues that we're seeing played out. So helplessness, hopelessness, a feeling of guilt, feeling that they've let their family members down. I've had so many people get in touch saying they've lost their family members, so they're dead, they're not coming back, they didn't see them, and they died feeling that they've been abandoned. How do we deal traumatically with that grief? You abandon the people that you loved most in the world. And the guilt, they put them in care because they felt that was the right place for them. And on top of that, the fact that there's very few answers. The expectation is, this is what's been done for your protection. How is that protecting anyone?
Yeah. Before we move on to our guests, I just want to remind people watching on Facebook, either on Unlocked or on Emma Kenny's Facebook page, we're going to run this as well on the Daily Express later on today. Get involved. Please leave your comments under the story. They're being fed to me as the broadcast is live. This is your show. We want to hear your stories. Get involved. And there's already one here from Kevin Hill saying it's disgraceful. I have no confidence in this government. And I think that's going to be a real key repetitive theme tonight, Emma. But before I reflect back on some of the experts we've spoken to during the past few months, with great experience of working with dementia and Parkinson's parents, let's go to our first story tonight. Maybe we could start with Michelle. So Michelle, tell us about your aunt, please.
Well, my aunt, Auntie Gladys, the legend as we call her, 97, drove trucks, army trucks during the war, very proud lady. Developed dementia in 2012. I was her sole carer, the nearest thing she's got to a family. She's no children of her own. When it became hard and difficult to look after her, it was advised that she went into a care home. She was happy in the one that she was in, then it was closed down. So she was moved recently last September to the one that she's in now. And she's been happy, well looked after, the staff were amazing. And then obviously March happened, and we were told, that's it, we're locking all the residents down and you won't be able to come and visit, window visits only. The last 8 months, I have to say, guys, from seeing a very proud lady, she's now a former herself. She's lost weight. She doesn't look smart anymore. Her clothes are hanging off her. She said to me, well, shouted through the window, I might as well be dead. And that you can imagine how that made me feel. And she said, I fought through a war for this. I might as well be in prison. And you're limited to half an hour slot through a window. And you go away thinking, wow, what can I do? I can't get in. I can't hug her. I can't tell her that it's going to be all right. It's her birthday on Sunday. I can't even go and see her. And like Emma said, the feeling of guilt and hopelessness, that what can we do? You almost feel like the lady did who tried to get her mother out. It really does make you feel that that's what you want to do. But is it the right thing to do? Or is it better that she's where she is and you hope that she doesn't die in the interim?
Well, before Emma, I'd like you to feed back in, if we could, to Michelle to offer her some support tonight. But I'd just like to say that I don't think you can gauge society in any clearer way than by how it treats its elderly and by how it treats its veterans. And with your aunt here, we have double whammy. A double whammy of a veteran who's also in a care home. My parents are knocking on, but they're mercifully not in care homes yet. I'm sending love to you. I'm already getting a bit wobbly lipped here. Emma, can I pass on to you? Can you give Emma some support and help, please?
I mean, Michelle, one of the things that I want to say is that what you just described, it's torturous for you because of the fact that you love her and you want to protect her, and every inch of your being, every atom within your body says that you feel like that's not what's happening. And it's not because she's not in care and with people who look after her. It's because that's not what care is about, is it? It's about love. It's about that special thing that you give her. You know, she hasn't had children. You've stepped in and you've been, to be fair, more present than most people are in Ant's lives. You've taken that role of almost being a daughter, and that's something you should be really proud of. But what I think we're missing constantly in this society, which is driving me crazy, is it's the humanness that makes us connected. It's our social interaction. It's the feeling wanted, cared for, loved, protected, that it's the thickness of sharing space, and it can't be done through glass. And that's what you're feeling. So everything that you feel is because you are a compassionate, loving human who knows what your aunt needs. And this is what's being denied. And I get doctors and medics getting in contact with me who tell me how I'm putting people at risk by my opinions. And it drives me crazy, because actually what I know is there is an instinctual intuition about our bodies that says, I know what these people need, and it's not being left alone. And actually it's also not giving people autonomy. Why are we not allowing the elderly to have those conversations and have those decisions? You know, they fought in the war. Why are we now saying that she's not allowed to have those choices? It really drives me insane. But what I constantly get from care workers is the opposite. So every care worker that gets in contact with me, firstly, they're devoted. Let's be honest, they're not the most highly paid people. They're dealing with highly, trained issues that they need to be qualified in to actually manage. And they're saying, I want families to be back in touch with their loved ones. I want them to see them because they see the difference. It's as simple as that. But I just think the other thing I just want to say before I finish is well done, because, you're being that niece that so many people aren't. So that's powerful. You're a great person.
Fabulous advice. 2 points I'd like to make. This is a live news show. I want to put this out there. Breaking news right now. And I think this is where we're going. We talked about this before, Emma, slightly going off topic of care homes. It's breaking news right now. Boris Johnson to announce freedom passes in areas with mass testing. Those who test negative will be given greater freedom to meet up with other people in public places. Emma, just a couple of weeks ago, we were called conspiracy theorists for saying this was going to happen. It is now happening. The government will actually give you more freedom if you get tested. We're moving towards a society, Emma, of greater and greater control. And sorry, if you bear with me here, ladies, this is worth talking about as an item of breaking news, because I know last week, Emma, we discussed the great anxiety, this sense of having to be compulsory tested, getting a freedom pass. This is an area of huge anxiety, isn't it, for the general public? And now it's happening.
Well, yeah. Well, it should be, because statistically we have all the data which evidences that we shouldn't be even having these conversations. We know who it affects, we know who to shield if they wish to be shielded. And if you think that the government being able to control your every move, and you're willingly giving away your freedom and democracy to the hands of individuals who've firstly been shown to manipulate and lie publicly, we have the evidence for that. And secondly, when it means that essentially they are going to create a class of people who basically have to either follow exactly what they say, giving up autonomy fully and literally becoming controlled by the state, you are no longer your own person. The minute that you are given a freedom pass over your body with caveats about what you do with it, you've just become a slave to the state. And if you're okay with that, we're on a different planet.
Well, I think that the greater concern here, I'm a social libertarian, but I also believe in doing the right thing. But you can bet your bottom dollar that the guests tonight, if they want to get anywhere near their relatives in care homes, they will be put on these compulsory testing lists. This will affect tonight's guests perhaps more than anybody. If you want to have any chance, this is ridiculous. This is totalitarianism. I don't want to speak for tonight's guests, and pardon me for going off piece here, but this is where we're at. We are now in a situation where you have to be tested to even do anything of social worth. How soon before, we saw in the week, you have to have a QR code to get in a football match, a health passport to travel, to get in a hospital. I believe this is creeping totalitarianism. I think it's a huge, huge concern, Emma.
I absolutely agree, and I would hope that people will peacefully resist, but know that that's what we've got to do now. We're getting to a point where we're having no freedom, no choice. Our choice is taken away, and it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Okay, so all of tonight's guests, Michelle, Judith and Lucy, I would like you to think about a statement you would like to deliver to Boris Johnson and or Matt Hancock. I should warn you, we're a family show. Try and go easy on the expletives if you can. And we've said before, Emma, and you know this is true, we know that number 10, watch unlocked. We've already had significant U-turn positions from the government when they tried to ban Remembrance Sunday, and we said no, and they did a U-turn. I want to move on now, if we could, to our second guest, Judith. Judith, would you mind sharing with us your story? And I should point out that all of our guests today really kindly and bravely got involved after Emma Kenny placed a public plea for guests on tonight's show. I think it's a truly commendable thing that you're doing, telling your personal stories, and it's not easy to do so. This is the 21st century. We're all used to Zoom, but I think it's really, really important that the public hear the humanity, not just from arm's length. So, Judith, would you mind please sharing the story about your mum?
Yeah. Up until March this year, my mum was living at home with my dad. And then in March, she had a fall and we thought she'd had a stroke. She was hospitalised and stayed in hospital until May. And she was assessed as needing to be in nursing care. So she was discharged in May from hospital into a nursing home. We didn't see her all the time that she was in hospital. When she went into the nursing home, we were a little bit like Michelle, where we could see her through the window initially. And then as the lockdown eased in around about July, the home started Zoom visits and socially distanced garden visits. So my mum would sit in the garden of the home on one side of the fence around the garden, and we would sit on the outside of the fence. So there was a physical barrier between us anyway, couldn't get near her. And all the time, she was asking why we weren't coming to see her, because although she's got dementia, she's still cognizant and she still knows who we are. And she couldn't understand why we couldn't come in and have a cup of tea with her. And she didn't understand about the virus, and that was the reason why we couldn't come in. So since September, we're in the Northeast, and the Northeast moved into Tier 2, so all of the garden visits got stopped then. And obviously the whole of the country's been the same since the latest lockdown. So we were just consigned to Zoom visits, and elderly people who've got dementia just don't get on with Zoom. It's very difficult for them. They don't get on with the time delays. There's too much background noise in the home, and she doesn't really want to take part. So I would say probably 4 times out of 5, we start a Zoom meeting and she just goes off. She just wanders off and closes the meeting down. So it's very upsetting. A bit like Michelle, we had a birthday for my mum. It was her birthday on the 5th of November. We were supposed to have a Zoom call with her to wish her happy birthday. And they rang us up and said, she's too upset. And I could hear her in the background saying, I don't want to live. And you just think, this is a lady who was used to being taken out and, you know, having a family around her. And obviously the home must try to give them activities to do, but they're locked in there. They don't get out. You know, the home previously would have taken them out on day trips now and again, out for lunch perhaps. And obviously they would have had the distraction of the family coming in to visit them and care for them. And they haven't got any of that now. And of course, we feel terrible as a family that she went into hospital just before lockdown. And we, you know, I'm sure all of us have thought at times, did we do the right thing by taking her to hospital, or should we just have let her fade away at home? At least that way she would have been surrounded by her family. So it's been very difficult, and yeah.
Yeah, before we cut to Emma, I can see you're shaking your head with exasperation and anguish there, Emma. You know, we've spoken to so many experts who work in this field on Unlocked, and I'll never forget Dr. Wakir Rashid, who we spoke to very early on, is now a regular commentator on TV. He works in the area of Parkinson's and dementia, and he said a thing I will never forget, and that was, everybody talks about quantity of life, living longer. Right. And I know, Emma, this is something that you're really, really passionate about. And he said, my patients, they care about quality of life. And you know, we're hearing so many stories, aren't we, Emma? Not just Judith. So many stories of, you know, I would rather live a shorter time in happiness and togetherness than this protracted kind of fading away, Emma. We hear that a lot, don't we?
Absolutely. And when you look at care homes and statistics of how long people tend to stay in care homes, it's often a very short period of time before they die at times, because people do go there in their, you know, very, very much the winter of their life. So many people, in fact, won't make it to see their families physically, you know, particularly those who've been in tier 3 like we have for like 1,000,000 years. But I just want to say this is something that people aren't connecting at the moment. The government, and actually it's not just the government, there's been a lot of professionals who supported this, which is just something I find inhumane. What we're doing is we're saying, you're a bad person for wanting to see your family. Yeah. You're a bad person for wanting to visit your care home and hold your loved one, because they might get COVID and they'll most likely, if they get COVID, survive it, statistically, evidenced by the data. But the fact that you want to do that makes you a terrible person, because what we want to do is keep them here, slowly degenerating, deteriorating, feeling abandoned, feeling lonely. And we equally want to torture you by not letting you see them. And if you do see them, it will be through glass. And if you're allowed to be near them, it will be at a distance. It goes against everything healthy, everything human. Listen, there has been a horrible virus that at the beginning was very badly managed by the government and very badly played out in care homes by the neglect of the services that should have been there to protect them. That's evidence. The inquiry will show that. We already know that. And that's being used, ironically, to drill down the rejection of a society that used to be connected. And it's mind-blowing. And I look at the way this has been done, and it's so easy to see. And yet now we've divided that, and do you know what? Now we've added it, and now we've got the pièce de résistance. Well, you can see them now, but what you're going to have to do is have a health passport and test, and then there might be other mandated issues.
Yeah, it's a huge surrender, and also a manipulation, but also there's something that I've always found unforgivable about the way, I hate to bring Brexit into it, but if we go back to how the media, how society, I thought, started this long-term disrespect for the elderly generation. Yeah. Sense of, you know, the elderly voted for this and it wasn't fair. And now the government weaponizes the elderly again. They are basically saying to the general population, the simple act of wanting to see your mother, your auntie, your father, your relatives is an act of inhumanity. You're going to kill them. And that's, right. I wonder, you know, tonight's guests, I'll ask you all, Michelle, Judith and Lucy, how difficult is that to take? This feeling that all you want to do is show love, but the government is saying that makes you a bad person. Judith?
What I find really difficult is that obviously, you know, it does make you feel terrible, the fact that you are made to feel that you might be carrying something terrible into the home. But the thing that's really getting to me is my dad has been waiting to have a hip replacement operation, and he's 88, he's going into hospital. We know that 20% of people who go into hospital get the infection, the COVID infection, whilst they're in there. And yet I would be allowed to visit my dad in hospital where there must be other vulnerable people there, but I can't see my mum in a care home. It just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on now to Lucy. And I'd like to ask you all this question, actually. It's important. I want to make a distinction here. You ladies must have conversations with the care home staff. We've had a lot of people saying today that we can't blame the care home staff. Now, they're being told to do this by the government. So I think it's really important here that we don't appear to be bashing the care homes or the staff. I mean, they're just doing what they're told, right? And I can see everybody's nodding along. So let's quickly go to Lucy. You've been sat there very patiently in your splendid AC/DC t-shirt, one of my all-time favorite bands. You know, we're allowed to smile as well on this show, because some of these difficult conversations, it's nice to have a bit of a smile as well. So Lucy, rocker Lucy, let's go to your story. First of all, your experience, you were your mother's carer, right?
Yes.
So you were your mother's carer. So let's talk a bit about your story. And then I'd like to ask you about your experiences with the care homes, and then cut back to the other guests, please, if we could.
No problem. Yeah, well, my mum went into a care home in October last year. Previous to that, I was a carer for her, doing everything from helping her with food, bathing, taking her out. At the time, she was using a frame to walk with. She basically had an accident and then went into hospital, then rehab, and then into the care home. When COVID sort of started, the home closed down a couple of weeks before the national lockdown. And since then, they've been doing distancing visits, which she can't manage very well at all. As you can imagine, it's quite cruel to be of a distance when all you want to do is basically just hold a hand, really. And they're now doing window visits. The care home, that's amazing. The people in there are amazing, but they're just not us. They're not the people that she wants to see.
You know,
I can see such a difference from March to now. She looks like a different person, and I don't even know she'd know who I was anymore.
Oh God.
Oh dear. You know, we've had a message straight away. I mean, I just wish I could reach in and give you a virtual hug. I'd probably get arrested, but I wish I could just reach in and hold your hand. We've got a message straight away here from Anne Sarah Barrell, and this might resonate with you. We are made to feel grateful if we are lucky enough to get a window visit. This is wrong. It's that downgrade of expectation, isn't it? Something that we would all think was like, well, why would I want to do that? That is not an act of intimacy or togetherness. Now we're made to feel lucky if we even get that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my children, because they're quite young, they don't understand. They understand that, you know, about COVID because it's on the telly every 2 minutes, but they don't understand why they can't see my mum, and they just cry all the time. And I don't sleep because if I wake up, I'm just thinking about, is she okay? What's she doing? And all I want to do is just hold her hand till she goes to sleep. I want to give her a hug so that she knows that she is loved and she is important, and, you know, she shouldn't be shut away from the world.
Emma, I'm going to cut to you there. You're nodding away feverishly, and, you know, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can we call it as it is? This isn't protection. This is systematic torture. It's not that the care homes are trying to actively engage in it. They're doing what they've been told. But can we call it as it is? We have literally, as you said, weaponized the elderly. On top of that, we've decided that death, the most inevitable experience, the thing that gives life worth, there is nothing without death. There is no value to our experience. We are using that as this almost scenario that doesn't have to ever happen. It does. It does have to happen for all of us. We all have to accept that. And sadly, COVID is one of those diseases that takes the more elderly and vulnerable before their time. Massively disproportionate. The survival rate is way more than the death rate for that. But nonetheless, it's going to happen to some people. But if you ask anybody in this situation, do you want to be kept alive? It means that you won't see your family. You'll long for them. You'll feel abandoned by them, even though that's not true. You'll go through all this. You'll feel confused because of your dementia. Do you want that so you can have 2 months longer, potentially, or even shorter because you degenerate because of the loneliness? I mean, it's become ridiculous. I don't care whether you're, epidemiologist. I don't care whether you're an expert in geriatric care. I don't care. If you think this is better, then I don't think you should be in that job, because compassion has left the building. And what we're dealing with now is parents of children who are going to be traumatized because they're living in care without the families that they love, but also a whole generation of children traumatized by the fact that they didn't get to be with their parents and feel riddled with guilt that they don't deserve. It just blows my mind that we're even in. How has this happened? How are we sitting in 2020 talking about health passports for a disease that we know most of us get well from, and also from actually making people feel guilty for loving people? Yeah. What has happened? This isn't the UK. I don't know where I'm living or what planet, what dystopian nightmare I've woken up in. But if anyone is okay with this, you're probably not in the right country.
I'd just like to reach out to you, Lucy. I'm not the only one that would like to hold your hand and give you a hug at the moment. We're getting tons of messages in on Facebook supporting you. I'm going to read a couple out here. Debbie Tranter says, this is a constant dehumanization.
Yes.
You're made to endure, and it's grossly unfair. Kevin says, stay strong, Lucy. Sending all my love. Kiss, kiss. People are really reaching out and trying to be supportive to you, Lucy. And Diane has said here, my grandma Jill celebrated her 100th birthday through a window. She died shortly after. Oh, God.
Oh, wow.
What do you say
Welcome
to
the UK in 2020, everybody. Welcome to the government measures. Welcome to the way that restrictions have truly played out, because everybody just goes with this narrative that's been peddled by the BBC, for example, telling you that everyone's dying, even though the evidence clearly demonstrates that's not the truth. But I tell you what we have done. We have tortured the very people who freed our nation, tortured the individuals who ironically died for freedom. That their families were affected by fathers who went to war. And now we're in situations where those very people who gave us, the generations of liberty have had theirs removed. And we're now walking into a state where we're not going to have freedom anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just backtrack if I could slightly, because I thought, Lucy, you made a really, really important point about the effect it's having on your children.
Yeah.
And the effect of the guilt that's giving you. And clearly, it's not your fault. Emma, what can Lucy do about that? I mean, she's putting a lot of burden on herself here. It's not her fault she's in the situation. She feels responsible for her kids. It's affecting her sleep. How can you help Lucy?
I think one of the most important things to recognise is the way you feel is firstly completely natural. And the reason that guilt is there, it's not actually to punish you. In normal circumstances, it would be to motivate you to make a change, but you don't have the option. So that's the problem. It's like having asthma to some degree. You want to be able to breathe clearly, but you can't. It's the same with this. You want to go and get her, see her, hold her. The guilt would be motivating you. You'd be going and changing that situation. So it's acknowledging that even though that feels horrible to have, that's because you're a good human being who would make a change to this situation. So instead of kind of using it against yourself, reframe it and say, this is because I'm a good human. I know what she needs and I would give it her. And that can be really helpful, because then it drops that anxiety level and makes you more comfortable with that difficult feeling. It comes from a great place. Secondly, with your children, you know what, you look young, so they're going to be young. So have as many conversations in a sense that they'll understand developmentally, which is all about love. You know, the fact that this is something that you can't control, but the love that you have transcends windows, transcends meeting. It's there all the time. It's what makes you feel sad, but it's also love in disguise. It really is. And then I suppose when it comes down to things like your sleep pattern, look, the thing about sleep is you need to be able to wind down, and you're catastrophizing and you're having all of those fears and feelings because you can't have control over your situation. Try to bring it back to what you can control. You're doing everything in your power to see her, but also bring it back to the micro things. Eat well, make sure that you relax, try and do some meditation. If your brain's running away from you at night, put some white noise on, maybe an app that will play things like sounds of storms. Those kind of things can lull you into a really good sleep. And also, a lot of people use the app Audible because people read to you and it kind of takes you into that dream state. Whatever it does that can help, go ahead and do it, because you don't deserve this pain. It's not your fault.
That's wise words, well said. And I'm telling you as well that there's a huge amount of support coming in. And Sarah Burrell again compelled to comment, Emma is a great ambassador for all of us desperate to see loved ones. Emma, you know, the reason I wanted to do this show with you is, it's because we have to, don't we? I mean, we've got to have these sort of conversations. I mean, they're bloody tough conversations to have. But I think
these are the real stories. Yeah, that's it, Martin. These are the real stories. This is happening day in and day out. We have children traumatized, regressing in behaviors. We've got 10-year-olds self-harming. We've got suicidal ideation in youth. And right the way through, we have people in care homes degenerating. This is real life. Put yourself in that position. I'm so tired of being shouted at by people who tell me that I'm trying to kill people by my opinions. Well, you know what? Go ahead, because I'm not going to be quiet, because I see these people that are being described today in these stories. I see these as people that we should be protecting, and we're doing the opposite with. And I'm tired of it. And all you see in the mainstream media on the whole is the same narrative, because Ofcom have gagged them. How have we got to this point? And what are we going to do together? And the reason I speak out, and the reason that all these people are speaking out today, we know this is rotten. We know it, we feel it, we sense it, we experience it. And the truth is, it's getting more rotten. And the only way we're going to make a change is when we start coming together. So all those people on Facebook, all of us talking now, we are the only ones with the power in a democracy. We have to peacefully resist what's happening. We have to, because unless we do, where will we end up?
No, I absolutely concur. And Emma, I've heard you called many things over the year. Quiet is not one of them. It's not a word I would use for you, and I mean that in a very, very good way. And I want to ask you the next point, because you did form the Recovery Project. We are finding alliances, we are finding allegiances in the arena of politics, where I have some small degree of influence. What can we do about this? Because it's a great starting point to share our stories and to get people motivated and involved in this emotional narrative. But in terms of affecting change, we're hearing about Amnesty International doing lawsuits. Well, that's in Amnesty International. What can we do as citizens to come together, to form collectives, to form groups, to put pressure on? What's the next steps, Emma, and how can we do it? Because I want to get involved in this.
I mean, I think that there's the obvious, which is you write to your MP, you get all your friends to write to your MP, you keep doing that. I'm a fan of protest. That might not be politically correct to say, but I am an old Hunt sub. I protested when I was a young person. We affected change. I think that as opposed to things being seen, then what you're shown as well, it's really important to say this, what you're shown by the press is this idea that they're conspiracy theorists. No, they're not. Most people who go on those protests just want democracy and freedom. We're seeing it all around the world. It's not being reported. I think the more that you can speak out about it on social media, the more you can take part in YouGov polls, because believe me, the type of people who are doing it at the moment seem to really enjoy lockdown. And on top of that, remember your communities, speak to your neighbours, gather people who can peacefully resist. I use the word peacefully resist because I believe that a lot can change when we refuse what the government are telling us, when we refuse to peddle that narrative, when we refuse to be shut down by people who tell us they know more. Because the truth is, what that says is that if you don't have the qualifications and experience and education because of your privilege, and I use that word, because of your privilege, they believe that you're not allowed an opinion. Ignore them. You are allowed an opinion. Everyone is. And the more that people from every distinction in class, every society within our society, every ethnicity, every religious belief system, the moment you stop being shut down because you might not have a degree or a PhD or a medical qualification, the moment you realize that you have as much right to know what's right, then we can fight. And until then, we're going to have a dictatorship deciding what's right for us.
You know, I completely agree. I mean, on Locked, we started this on a shoestring. We did it for no money. We released a video last week, Michael Yeadon, who spoke.
Oh, he's amazing.
Thank you. It's on Unlocked still. It's the top video on this page. It was banned by YouTube on Thursday because it dared to challenge the government's calamitous handling of this pandemic. YouTube took it down in an act of big tech censorship. It's still on Facebook, at least for now. It's had 280,000 views just by word of mouth. People are coming to platforms like this to get outside of the mainstream media. And I want to encourage anybody out there listening to tonight's show, not only to follow us at Unlocked United Kingdom on social media, but get involved. Send us your messages. If you're part of a campaign group that's protesting about care homes, the malpractice, the mistreatment of the elderly, send us your details. We want to put wind in your sails. We want to get collectives. There are more of us. You said this last week, Emma. There are more of us than there are of them. People power has the ability to make a difference. We want to take these stories that are heartbreaking, that we won't be broken by them. We should come together and do something about it. And I really hope that tonight's guests, feel that we want to join forces and do something about this. Now, I want to quickly ask you, ladies, if I could, for some of the more positive stories about the care home workers, because they must be going through a form of difficulty and torture themselves, right? And then tonight's finale, I want you to give it both barrels to Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock, anybody else in your firing line. Let's hear it. And anybody on Facebook right now, get your comments down. We're going to compile a list of these comments and we're going to get them to number 10, because we turn protest into power and action on Unlocked. Let's talk first about the stories of some of the people in the care homes. Maybe we go in reverse order. Michelle, you've been listening into a lot of points. Anything you care to comment on tonight's show, please feel free to do so as well. But also, what about other relatives? I mean, have you formed a sense of comradeship with any other relatives on the way in and out, or in the car parks or anything like that? And what is that sense within and around care homes from the workers and also other relatives?
Actually, I haven't really, because you have a designated visiting slot. Because it's a window visit, there's only a small opportunity that you can go. So I'm usually there on my own. There is no other relatives around. So I have my window visit and that's it. I go. But I have to say, I can't speak highly enough of the care home that she is in. I mean, they have kept them entertained. They have. I mean, Emerald like this. They have gin and tonic on a Wednesdays. Sing along. So they do keep them entertained as best they can. It's not family, but it's the best that they can do. And they are an amazing team, and I can't fault them, and I can't praise them highly enough. But like Lucy said, and like Judith said, they're not family. but they're doing the best and they're making the best of a good situation. Can I just briefly say, 2 weeks ago, my aunt had a fall. And they rang me straight away to say that she'd had a fall. They phoned the GP. The GP refused to go and visit because of COVID. He wouldn't go out. I spoke to the GP surgery, and again, they said, well, we can do it over the telephone. And I said, no, just a moment. I said, she's already been denied her basic rights of a visit from me. Surely you cannot deny her a basic right from a visit from a GP. I then got in contact with I won't name who it is, but he's a very close family friend who is also an MP. Within 4 or 5 hours, there was a GP visit.
Right. So when you made yourself slightly difficult, things happened. Do you know what, Michelle? I think there's a huge conversation to be had about GPs after this. Bus drivers, supermarket workers, teachers. My wife's a teacher. They were all frontline workers. Why weren't GPs? Now I'm sort of float that idea out there. That's going to get me some heat, no doubt. Give us your comments on the Facebook page. What do you think about GPs? Have they been missing in action? Should they have been better utilised? They certainly were in other countries. We saw that across Italy. GPs became testing stations. The GPs themselves became proper frontline workers instead of being mothballed away and only dealing with telephone consultations. I can see you nodding your head in agreement there, Michelle. You agree with that point?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it may be an unfashionable point, but look, there's no time for niceties. We're in the middle of a crisis. Judith, I want to get some comments from yourself, because I think it's really, really important. Thank you, Michelle, for those comments, and Lucy earlier. We can't be bashing the care home staff. I don't think it's fair. And we've had a lot of comments today on Twitter and Facebook saying, you know, my relatives have been taken great care of as best as they can be, considering the circumstances. So Judith, any thoughts on that point?
Yeah, I wrote to my mum's MP to complain at the fact that we haven't been able to see her, because when someone's got dementia, for a long time before she went into this care home, I felt, you know, that I'd lost my mum. And since she's been in the care home, it's like I've lost her again. You know, you go through a grieving process through all of this. So I wrote to the MP, and I said to her MP that I wasn't complaining about the care home. I thought the staff were doing a brilliant job, and they were obviously just following the guidance from the local director of public health. So, you know, I've got no complaints against those. We only really see them now on the Zoom calls, or sometimes if we go to hand stuff in for my mum, and that's another problem, you know, just the practicalities. She lost about 2 stone from March when she went into hospital to what she is now. I don't even know what size clothes she wears or anything like that. It's just, it's awful, it really is. But when we had the socially distanced garden visits in the summer, we did actually get to, you know, to see some of the care staff close up. And they said this, you know, they perfectly understood how we were feeling and thought that it was really wrong that we weren't allowed to visit, and inhuman, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point you bring up as well, Judith, about the difficulties of using Zoom with elderly people. I know my mum had great difficulty, you know, opening and sending emails at first, you know, and that's when she was relatively compos mentis, at least after a few of the gin and tonics you mentioned earlier. My mum likes a bit of that. She's probably watching. Sorry, mum. The point I'm trying to make is that the solution of technology, Zoom, the whole world was on Zoom, seems appropriate if you are younger and able-bodied and able-minded, but then that gets lost in translation of a completely alien form of communication and networking. As you said, they were just disengaging, and it's just not the same. It is not the same as looking at a real person. Lucy, you've already spoken in glowing terms of the treatment the care home staff were giving. Would you like to send a message of thanks to them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the care home that my mum is in, the staff are amazing. They've got a couple of ladies who do entertainment, music and things. And what I've always found about my mum is music is what just brings her alive. And she might forget other things, but music, she can remember the lyrics to everything. And it just just a smile on her face when anything like that's on. So I'm just really thankful for all the work that they are doing. And I know that they do understand how we're feeling, because them as carers have often said to me that they just wish they could just throw the doors open and allow people in. But it's just this control that the government's got over them that doesn't allow them to. Because also in my mum's care home, there's some of them who have relatives in other care homes, so they know exactly how we're feeling.
He's got a couple of comments come in. JJ Baxter is saying, thank goodness for you guys. We are right behind you. And they're talking about the guests, not just Unlocked. And another comment here, I think agreeing with something we said. GPs have been missing in action while care staff are on minimum wage on the front line. Now, that's a powerful point. Emma, you've been listening away there to some of the support being given to the care home staff. And I know that this is something you care passionately about too. Just pointed out by one of our comments on Facebook. These are people who have been sacrificing their lives working on the front line for not a lot of pay. We shouldn't be bashing those staff, should we?
No, I mean, I have a lot of followers that work in care homes that are constantly in contact with me, and every single one of them is completely against the restrictions. On my experience, listen, it'll be biased because I've got my views. I think we need to get back to normal. I think we need to offer people the opportunity to shield if they wish to. I also think that people who are older should be given autonomy, because that's about respect and seeing individual choice. But I think that carers go into that job because they're vocational. Listen, they have hard work, long hours. They're working with a huge array of specialist issues, from dementia all the way through to mental health issues, of course, because the elderly are just human beings who've grown old. So there is that whole diversity, and they're on very low wages. They're not doing it because it's a career in the way that some people would consider a career. They're doing it because it's a vocation. They care. They believe that they can have a positive impact. And I think that they must go home every night, as I would and did and do when I'm working with clients who have got horrible lives at times. They're going to know that part of the experience right now for the people that they desperately care for is being tortuous because of the fact that they're being denied the very thing that makes them human. I don't get any of this. You know what? If there's one thing I could say about 2020, it's that what have we done? What have we done to the UK all the way through? I cannot get my head around people standing for this anymore. I can't. I feel like there should be some kind of reaction to just stop this now. And I don't know why everyone's being as well behaved as they are. I don't get it. The psychologists, the mean psychologists in my belief, have done a big job of manipulation, coercion, and they're gaslighting the nation to hell. Gaslighting us. How has that become legal? That the bloody government can gaslight and coercively control people to a point where they're being denied the very thing that makes. There are people. They are your family. Back off. Back off the government. Let people be with the people that they love. Oh, God, I hope the exposés come, Martin. I hope the exposés and the inquiries, because the way it's looking, we're going in a different direction right now. You know what's blown my mind? At the beginning of this, I read conspiracy theories and thought, well, that's a little bit crazy. And now they're talking about health passports. Who's stupid?
Well,
me.
I think the conspiracy theory is now reality. The dystopia
Unbelievable.
is now today. That's been proven by these health passports.
And Martin, what does that say as well? Just to pose the question to you, if they've been right this far, what does that mean? Because it doesn't end well from what I've seen.
Well, I think the fight back should start right here. And
I agree.
What I mean now, let's have a drum roll, a metaphorical drum roll. Let's sound the steam, and let's have, ladies, a comment that you would like to deliver to Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock, and we will make sure they get it, if necessary, in the neck. Let's start from the top of the show. Michelle Brown, what is your message for Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson? Fire away.
My message to you both are you going to make vaccines mandatory, yes or no? And I want to know houses. I want to know, yes or no, are you going to make mandatory vaccines? And also, are you going to blackmail me into having to be tested in order to see my relative who is dying in a care home.
Delivered with passion. Judith, what is your message for Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson? Fire away.
I believe that all restrictions should end. I think people are sensible enough to know that if they're not very well, they shouldn't go and see their relatives in the care homes. I believe everything that Dr. Mike Yaden says, that all of the Pillar 2 testing should be ended in the community. And I think it would all just go over. You know, we wouldn't, like he says, we wouldn't know that there was a pandemic about. I don't know anyone who's had COVID. You know, full stop. No one in my, in my circle of friends or, the people that I know have had COVID.
Before we move on to Lucy, I'd just like to add, my father, who is 83, he had COVID. My father's partner, who is 78 and has a congenital heart condition, was given 1 night to live 4 years ago, contracted COVID in hospital a few weeks ago. I was absolutely at my wit's end when I found out. Pat was denied care at home because the care workers wouldn't come in to help her at home. My father became primary carer and they both survived. In fact, when I phoned my dad, because my mum had said, your dad's not right, you better phone him up. I got through and I was really nervous because I've been told constantly, even though I'm a journalist who's been looking at this from the very, very beginning, trying to keep sane, trying to keep it about evidence. I was still scared because I've been terrified into that position by the propaganda that we are constantly fed. I spoke to my dad and I said, Dad, are you all right? And he sounded terrible. He went, what are you on about? I got back from the pub. I've had 4 pints, son. I got a bag of chips on the way back and all. And I was like, oh my God. And I was so convinced that this was going to be the end. When it wasn't, I was really surprised. So what I want to say is this calamitous, apocalyptic version that we're given by the government often isn't even the case anyway. That's my little say. Sorry, Lucy, I got carried away. This should be about you, not me. Lucy, I'd like you now to give your message to Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson, please.
Well, my message to them would be just not to do this. These are people who are heading towards the end of their life. They're killing them with isolation, and all they need is human interaction from the families and to know that we're there for them. And also it would help the care home staff who are really struggling with this as well. And it's just really not fair. And if they could see, truly see the difference in people from March to now, if they had a heart, they wouldn't be doing this.
Maybe you've hit the nail on the head. Maybe, Lucy, you've hit the nail on the head here. We have a government that's not ruling with its heart. It's not ruling with compassion. It's ruling with punishing worst case scenario data extrapolated onto a population it wishes to control rather than to empathize with. And we started this show by saying there is no firmer evidence of a value of a society than how we treat our elderly and our veterans. I think we've had a really telling insight tonight into this. It's been emotional, and it's not surprising it's been emotional. This is one of the trickiest topics of all. We've had a huge response through the comments. They still keep piling in. This one here is rather sad. Kelly Burns, my mum was discharged from hospital to a care home. I was denied visiting rights. She died 2 days later. I didn't see her once in the final 8 months. Now, how can we live in a society where that doesn't get through to the stone hearts of those in power? Emma, I think I might need to brace myself here. I might need to assume the brace position. I'm going to finish this show tonight by asking you once again, as I do every week, what is your message for Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson tonight on Unlocked?
My message for Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson is very clear. We know the data, we see the evidence, we recognise the impact on the elderly, but also on all generations. And you may believe that you can push this agenda further and further and further to a point where you have complete control, but you should look back at history, because history tells the same story time and time again, and it's a simple one. When the empire becomes too controlling, the people ensure that the empire falls. And for everyone pushing absolute control, equally, people as powerful will be pushing for liberty. So just know, remember this, because in the end, history will tell a tale and you won't be the ones winning.
Fitting words, a fitting finale. You know, what I'm getting tonight out of a difficult conversation actually is a spirit of defiance, a spirit of we must listen to the humanity rather than treating everybody as pieces of data. How about treating us as human beings? How about giving us liberty rather than totalitarianism? And there is no greater way of decimating our mental health than preventing us from seeing our loved ones in their final years. Wow, what a show. And the comments are still flooding in. But look, we are going to get through this. The final comment has just come in from Facebook. We will all get through this together. Please, everyone, stay strong. Not just tonight's guests, but everybody watching and everybody out there. Keep those comments coming in. Michelle, Judith, Lucy, we feel privileged to have heard your stories tonight. And Emma, you're always an inspiration. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Get involved. Send us your comments. Bang it around social media. Let's never give up. Now, we must use these difficult conversations as a springboard for togetherness, for solidarity, for hope, and for fight. We can't give up. I hope you've enjoyed watching the show. Thank you, ladies, for taking part. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you next week again on Emma Kenny Live Clinic here exclusively on Unlocked. Thank you and good night.